Good evening and welcome to the Gospel Truth. I'm Alan Jackson, bringing to you spiritual songs and hymns and the power of the spoken word of God. First of all, giving thanks to God Almighty for blessing me with this another outpouring of His tender love and mercy, and that He's allowed me once again to be on this time side of life and have this another blessed privilege to come to you in His name by way of this television medium and to bring to you another message from His holy and divine word. And as I always do, I'd like to continue to express my appreciation to the production staff for their continued service to the gospel truth. And it's my prayer that God will continue to bless each one of them with those things that He knows that they are standing in need of. And I'm praying on your behalf as participant observers. And it is my prayer that God will continue to bless you and your family with all of those things that He knows that you're standing in need of as well. And then, of course, I'm encouraging you to pray on my behalf because I'm also standing in need of prayer. And it's only God who can provide me with those things that I am standing in need of. And so this evening, as we continue in our tribute to Black American History 2022, the world has lost a great black man who championed the core cause of freedom, justice, equality, and the demise of the apartheid system of government in South Africa. I recognize Archbishop Desmond Tutu, the 1984 Nobel Peace Prize laureate, as a great freedom fighter of my time. He transitioned on December the 26th, 2021. And it was in 1995, Tutu was chosen by President Nelson Mandela to chair South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission and to investigate the crimes during the apartheid regime. This is looking back at the life of Archbishop Desmond Tutu.
He was first and foremost a priest, not a politician. But for the best part of half a century, he was the face of reconciliation and South Africa's moral compass.
The system of this country, apartheid, is immoral. The system of this country is evil.
Desmond Mbilo Tutu remained outside of party politics, but he used the church as a platform for protest against white minority rule. It was under South Africa's oppressive government that he first campaigned against apartheid. When emotions were boiling over, his influence helped prevent bloodshed, and in 1984 he was given the highest recognition for his efforts.
When you've been given the Nobel Peace Prize, it doesn't really belong to you, or in a way you can say it makes you answerable to the world. I mean, the world, as it were, has a piece of you.
He was a compassionate and sensitive man, one who would cry along with the victims as they gave their harrowing evidence at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It was Tutu who coined the phrase Rainbow Nation to describe South Africa's ethnic diversity, preaching unity in the face of adversity. But even after South Africa became a democratic country, Desmond Tutu was not afraid to speak out against injustices, and he was often scathing in his criticism of the governing ANC.
I am warning you. I am warning you that we will pray as we prayed for the downfall of the apartheid government. We will pray for the downfall of a government that misrepresents us.
A spiritual figure with a global influence, there were few issues in the world that Desmond Tutu hasn't spoken out about, from human rights abuses to climate change to poverty.
When you want peace, you negotiate not with your friends. That is what at least we discovered in South Africa. That is what they discovered in Northern Ireland. You talk to the ones that you least like.
I will remember his moral courage that after going on his knees, no situation was insurmountable. And for him, that Roman passage that if God is for us, nothing can be against us. It was not just a cliche, it was something that he lived.
It's an enormous loss for South Africa. But Desmond Tutu's irrepressible sense of humor and relentless pursuit of justice will long be remembered by all.
This is remembering Desmond Tutu's life and legacy.
We will be free! All of us! Black and white together! For we are marching to freedom!
Archbishop Desmond Tutu was an Anglican bishop and a leader of the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. Born in 1931, he followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a high school teacher. He then switched paths to become an Anglican priest. Tutu was on the front line fighting for freedom and equality in South Africa, where racially segregated apartheid began in 1948.
We know we shall overcome evil.
In 1984, Tutu won the Nobel Peace Prize for his role in advocating for nonviolent protests to end the brutal practice of white minority rule.
I ask you, welcome our brand new state president, out of the box, Nelson Mandela.
In 1994, South Africa elected its first black president, Nelson Mandela. Tutu said voting in that democratic election was like falling in love. The two were counterparts in the struggle for freedom. After Mandela's election, the Archbishop chaired the Truth and Reconciliation Commission investigating crimes of the apartheid era. He delivered the final report to Mandela in 1998. Tutu advocated for racial justice and LGBTQ rights globally. Tutu died from complications from prostate cancer, which he was first diagnosed with in 1997. When asked how he would like to be remembered, Tutu answered,
He loved. He laughed. He cried. He was forgiven. He forgave.
For more on the life of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, I spoke with NewsHour special correspondent Charlene Hunter-Gauld. Thank you so much for joining us. I have to ask you this. Where would the end of apartheid be if it had not been for Desmond Tutu?
Well, we may still be involved in it, but actually, I think that one of the things that Desmond Tutu, and I'm so sorry to hear he has transitioned, as the South Africans say. They never use the term dead or death. But I think that so much changed as a result of his work. And yet, like in America, we go around in circles sometimes trying to get the more perfect union. And so I think that at the time that Archbishop Tutu was very active, especially with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, it was the time to set South Africa on a new path. And sometimes, as you would know, the paths have rubbish in them. But his principles were those that enabled those who cared about the things that he did to sweep away that rubbish in the past. So it never goes away. South Africa is having a rough time today, as we are here in America. But there are people who have given us lessons to survive even the worst of times. And he was one of those.
You know, he chaired this Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa on behalf of the president at the time, Nelson Mandela. And he wrote in one of his reports, Tutu did, not to judge the morality of people's actions, but to act as an incubation chamber for national healing, reconciliation, and forgiveness. But that didn't sit well with a lot of South Africans, though.
Well, it didn't, but it didn't dissuade him from, as a preacher's kid, a PK, which I am, I always understood what moved Archbishop Tutu, and it was his faith. And his faith taught him to have faith in people. And those could be people whom he wanted to have support him, but others who he knew it was going to be a challenge to achieve. And so as we have here in America today, we have a younger generation that wants things to happen a lot faster, the equality that we've been promised in our Constitution. And the same is true in South Africa. So you had people on all sides of the, shall we say, the freedom equation. But he understood all of that, and he never criticized them. He always said he understood their impatience, and yet he continued on his path toward reconciliation because he thought that that was probably the most important thing that could happen in the country, reconciliation. And although not everybody bought into it, he did help prepare the country for one of the greatest presidents who ever lived, Nelson Mandela. And he also helped to ease the transition in so many ways.
Charlene, tell us, what was it like when you first met him in his younger days and you were in South Africa?
I think he was about 67 years old at the time and had a very young spirit. In fact, when he was running the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, we learned from him that he had prostate cancer. And he said that probably the best kind of healer is a wounded healer. And what surprised me more than anything was as challenging as the country was at the time and as serious as the position that he had to determine what South Africa could do going forward. He was always positive, and he had a great sense of humor. I mean, you can find pictures of him just laughing. And that's what struck me often in the meetings of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which I attended. Although it was all very serious, he would find humor in some things. And I think that helped in many ways to ease the tension. So he was a man of many different attitudes and positions. And I think all of that made him a very successful person in the efforts that he was trying to achieve. And we'll always remember him for what he contributed to a new South Africa.
We've been speaking with Charlene Hunter-Gault on the passing of Desmond Tutu. Charlene, thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to talk about such a great man.
I want you to know that the Gospel of Truth does have a prayer list. We do encourage you to write to us and send to us the names of your friends, your relatives, and your loved ones. We will add their names to the prayer list. I'll pray for them, encourage you to pray for them, and everyone in the viewing audience to pray for them as well. And you can send those names to P.O. Box 3944, Berkeley, California. Or you can, and that zip code is 94703. Or you can call the prayer line at 510-848-8843, and there you can leave the names of your friends, your relatives, and your loved ones, and we will add their names to the prayer list. Or if you have a Bible question, you can also raise that question, and we will answer it on the air. Also, I want to let you know that the Gospel of Truth does have a channel over there on YouTube. All you have to do is go to the internet, bring up YouTube, and insert the Gospel Truth with Alan Jackson, and then you will have access to all the videos that we have on our channel. And by all means, do subscribe, and once you do that, whenever a new video is uploaded, then you will have first preference to see what it is.
I got my COVID-19 vaccination, and here's why. This isn't about gimmicks or sentiment or what commercial I like. This is about facts. COVID-19 vaccines are safe and effective. Millions of doses have already been given in the United States, and these vaccines have the most intensive safety monitoring in U.S. history. People from different races, ages, genders, and ethnicities participated in large clinical trials around the world to make sure this vaccine worked for all kinds of people. The amount of time and effort dedicated to developing these vaccines was huge. Scientists used existing research and technology so they could get the vaccines developed quickly and safely without skipping any steps. If you need any more information, use a reliable source like the CDC website to get the facts.
Now, this is our champion of peace, freedom, justice, and equality, and the 1964 Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., on the power of love.
That you want to be integrated with yourself, and the way to be integrated with yourself is be sure that you meet every situation of life with an abounding love. Never hate, because it ends up in tragic, neurotic responses. Psychologists and psychiatrists are telling us today that the more we hate, the more we develop guilt feelings, and we begin to subconsciously repress or consciously suppress certain emotions, and they all stack up in our subconscious selves and make for tragic neurotic responses. And may this not be the neuroses of many individuals as they confront life, that is an element of hate there. Modern psychology is calling us now to love. And long before modern psychology came into being, the world's greatest psychologist who walked around the hills of Galilee told us to love. He looked at men and said, love your enemies, don't hate anybody. It's not enough just to hate your friends, because to love your friends, but because when you start hating anybody, it destroys the very center of your creative response to life and the universe. So love everybody. Hate at any point is a cancer that gnaws away the very vital center of your life and your existence. It is like corroding acid that eats away the best, the objective center of your life. So Jesus says love, because hate destroys the hater as well as the hated. Now that is the final reason I think that Jesus says love your enemies. It is this, that love has within it a redemptive power. And that is a power there that eventually transforms individuals. That's why Jesus says love your enemies. Because if you hate your enemies, you have no way to redeem and to transform your enemies. But if you love your enemies, you will discover that at the very root of love is the power of redemption. You just keep loving people and keep loving them, even though they're mistreating you. Here's a person who is a neighbor, and this person is doing something wrong to you, and all of that. Just keep being friendly to that person. Keep loving them. Don't do anything to embarrass them. Just keep loving them, and they can't stand it too long. Oh, they react in many ways in the beginning. They react with bitterness because they're mad because you love them like that. They react with guilt feelings, and sometimes they'll hate you a little more at that transition period, but just keep loving. And by the power of your love, they will break down under the load. That's love, you see. It is redemptive. This is why Jesus says love. There's something about love that builds up. And it's creative. There is something about hate that tears down and is destructive. So love your enemies. I think one of the best examples of this, we all remember the great president of this United States, Abraham Lincoln, these United States rather. You remember when Abraham Lincoln was running for president of the United States, there was a man who ran all around the country talking about Lincoln. He said a lot of bad things about Lincoln, a lot of unkind things. And sometimes he would get to the point that he would even talk about his looks, saying, you don't want a tall, lanky, ignorant man like this as the President of the United States. He went on and on and on and went around with that type of attitude and wrote about it. Finally, one day, Abraham Lincoln was elected President of the United States. And if you read the great biography of Lincoln, if you read the great works about him, you will discover that as every president comes to the point, he came to the point of having to choose a cabinet. And then came the time for him to choose a Secretary of War. He looked across the nation and decided to choose a man by the name of Mr. Stanton. And when Abraham Lincoln stood around his advisors and mentioned this fact, they said to him, Mr. Lincoln, are you a fool? You know what Mr. Stanton has been saying about you? Do you know what he has done, tried to do to you? Do you know that he has tried to defeat you on every hand? Do you know that, Mr. Lincoln? Did you read all of those derogatory statements that he made about you? Abraham Lincoln stood before the advisors around him and said, oh yes, I know about it, I read about it, I've heard it myself. After looking over the country, I find that he is the best man for the job. Mr. Stanton did become Secretary of War, and a few months later, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. If you go to Washington, you will discover that one of the greatest statements ever made about Abraham Lincoln was made about this man, Stanton. As Abraham Lincoln came to the end of his life, Stanton stood up and said, now he belongs to the ages. He made a beautiful statement concerning the character and the stature of this man. If Abraham Lincoln had hated Stanton, if Abraham Lincoln had answered everything Stanton said, Abraham Lincoln would have not transformed and redeemed Stanton. Stanton would have gone to his grave hating Lincoln, and Lincoln would have gone to his grave hating Stanton. But through the power of love, Abraham Lincoln was able to redeem Stanton. That's it. That is a power in love that our world has not discovered yet. Jesus discovered it centuries ago. Mahatma Gandhi of India discovered it a few years ago, but most men and most women never discover it. They believe in hitting for hitting. They believe in an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. They believe in hating for hating. But Jesus comes to us and says, this isn't the way. So this morning, as I think of the fact that our world is in transition now, our whole world is facing a revolution. Our nation is facing a revolution. Our nation. One of the things that concerns me most is that in the midst of the revolution of the world, in the midst of the revolution of this nation, that we will discover the meaning of Jesus' words. History, unfortunately, leaves some people oppressed, and some people oppressors. And there are three ways that individuals who are oppressed can deal with their oppression. One of them is to rise up against their oppressors with physical violence and corroding hatred. Oh, this isn't the way. For the danger and the weakness of this method is its futility. Violence creates many more social problems than it solves. God said in so many instances that as a Negro in particular, and colored peoples all over the world struggle for freedom, if they succumb to the temptation of using violence in that struggle, unborn generations will be the recipients of a long and desolate night of bitterness. And our chief legacy to the future will be an endless reign of meaningless chaos. Violence isn't the way. Another way is to acquiesce and to give in, to resign yourself to the oppression. Some people do that. They discover the difficulties of the wilderness moving into the promised land, and they would rather go back to the flesh pots of Egypt because it's difficult to get into promised land, and so they resign themselves to the fate of oppression. They somehow acquiesce to this thing. But that too isn't the way, because non-cooperation with evil is as much a moral obligation as is cooperation with good. That is another way. That is through organized mass nonviolent resistance based on the principle of love. It seems to me that this is the only way as our eyes look to the future. As we look out across the years and across the generations, let us develop and move right here. We must discover the power of love, the power, the redemptive power of love. And when we discover that, we will be able to make of this old world a new world. We will be able to make men better. Love is the only way.
I got my COVID-19 vaccination, and here's why. This isn't about gimmicks or sentiment or what commercial I like. This is about facts. COVID-19 vaccines are safe and effective. Millions of doses have already been given in the United States, and these vaccines have the most intensive safety monitoring in U.S. history. People from different races, ages, genders, and ethnicities participated in large clinical trials around the world to make sure this vaccine worked for all kinds of people. The amount of time and effort dedicated to developing these vaccines was huge. Scientists used existing research and technology so they could get the vaccines developed quickly and safely without skipping any steps. If you need any more information, use a reliable source like the CDC website to get the facts.
I want you to know that the Gospel of Truth does have a prayer list. We do encourage you to write to us and send to us the names of your friends, your relatives, and your loved ones. We will add their names to the prayer list. I'll pray for them, encourage you to pray for them, and everyone in the viewing audience to pray for them as well. And you can send those names to P.O. Box 3944, Berkeley, California, or you can, and that zip code is 94703, or you can call the prayer line at 510-848-8843, and there you can leave the names of your friends, your relatives, and your loved ones, and we will add their names to the prayer list. Or if you have a Bible question, you can also raise that question, and we will answer it on the air. Also, I want to let you know that the Gospel of Truth does have a channel over there on YouTube. All you have to do is go to the internet, bring up YouTube, and then insert the Gospel Truth with Alan Jackson, and then you will have access to all the videos that we have on our channel. I'm Alan Jackson, and I'm inviting you to join us again next week, if it's God's will, when the Gospel of Truth will once again come your way, bringing to you spiritual songs and hymns and the power of the spoken word of God. Until then, it is my prayer that God will continue to bless you and your family and to keep you all safe.